Good morning. Good morning, everyone. Thank you all for taking your seats and getting underway. I'm David Teplow. Excuse me. I'm co-chair of the CEO Forum along with Carl Chudnovsky and Greg Stoller, and it's my pleasure to welcome you all to Hebrew College and to thank you for coming to our third CEO Forum. Like most of you, I'm not usually here at Hebrew College early on a Tuesday morning, though on Friday mornings I am here most weeks for an early morning study class along with 20 or so classmates and friends. I've been doing that for 24 years now, coming to early morning study class. And you know, why is that? Why get up early in the morning and schlep to Newton Center or to downtown Boston or Needham or wherever to spend 90 minutes discussing and dissecting ancient biblical texts? Why do that? It's a workout for my soul, that's why. When I want to strengthen my body, I get on my bike or I go to the gym. When I want to strengthen my mind, I pick up a good nonfiction book or I watch Jeopardy. And when I want to strengthen my ethical and spiritual self, I come here. And I know I'm getting a great workout because I get to study with some of the most brilliant and insightful rabbis of our time. Rabbis like Or Rose, Alan Ullman, Art Green, and Nehemia Polen, who will be sharing a reflection with us in just 1 minute. So that's like getting a weekly bike ride with Lance Armstrong, or a weekly dinner discussion with Alex Trebek. So if you're interested in a really good spiritual workout, I highly recommend Hebrew College. There are a number of classes and a number of locations, and you can learn more about that from any of the staff here today, or by going online to hebrewcollege.edu and looking under Adult Learning. So before I turn over the podium, I just want to point out the cards that are on each of your tables, which you should use to write down any questions you may have for Gail Goodman. Somebody will come by to pick those up just before the Q&A session. So again, thank you very much for coming this morning. It's now my great pleasure to introduce a great scholar, a great thinker, and a great teacher, Rabbi Nehemia Polen.
Very gracious. Thank you so much. Rabbi Simcha Bunim of Pshischa, early 19th century Polish Hasidic master, famous for rapier-sharp wit, challenging questions posed to his Hasidic followers, gnomic, what we would call Zen-like parables and wisdom. One morning, maybe around 8 a.m., walks into the Beit Midrash, the study hall. The Hasidim rise when the rabbi walks in. Don't. He says, Zetz Chavek, sit down, I have a question to ask you all. He says, you're walking down the street, you walk into the marketplace in Pshischa. You know, these are all hard scrabble, what we would call really, really tough towns. And he says, you're walking in the marketplace, there's a gentleman in front of you, and you see a piece of paper fluttering out of his pocket. You get closer, you look down on the street, actually you look down in the dirt, and you see, oh my God, it's 1,000 ruble banknote. What do you do? What do you do? The Hasidim are struck. They don't know. What does the rabbi want? What is this question? Well, what do you do? Somebody answer me. Somebody answer me. Finally, somebody raises his hand and says, Rabbi, of course, I would give it back. And the rabbi says, I'll say it in Yiddish, Bist a nar, you're a fool. And I remember, I heard the story once, and the rabbi added in Yiddish, Bist a ligner, you're a liar also. Whoa, the Hasidim are really astonished. So he asks the question again, the same words. He says, you're walking down the street in the marketplace in Pshischa. Do you hear me? And the man in front of you, a piece of paper flutters out of the pocket. You get close. You look and you see it's 1,000 ruble bank. Now, what do you do? What do you do? Right? Somebody answer. So somebody else raises their hands and says, remembering what the first person said, and the rabbi's response says, well, Rabbi, I guess I would keep it. And the rabbi fires back, Mr. Ganef, you're a thief. Now they're totally befuddled. The rabbi, again, in the exact same words, asks the question, do you hear me, Hasidim? You're walking down the street, and the person in front of you, a piece of paper falls out of his pocket. You get close, and it's a Russian imperial 1,000 ruble bank note. What do you do? What do you do? And now everybody's afraid to say anything. The first person said, I'll give it back. He said, you're a fool. Second person said, I'll keep it. Said, you're a thief. The Hasidim are just totally, they don't know what to say. Finally, the youngest person in the world, the youngest person in the room, maybe he got in there on some high school enrichment program. A 14-year-old boy, the only one who now has the courage or the temerity to raise his hand and says, yes, young man, what would you do? And the young man says, Rabbi, I don't know what I would do, but I pray to God that if such a thing would happen to me, I would have the courage and the wisdom to do the right thing. And the rabbi said, that's the answer I was looking for, and he walked out of the room. Go back to your studies. So what do I take out of this story? No, we look for guidance in this world. And in this room, in this building, we look in the sacred texts and the ancient traditions, and we try to go deep, and we try to answer ourselves. And we try to anchor ourselves in the depth of wisdom. At the end of the day, we will always be accosted by unforeseen circumstances, by events and by emergent episodes and activities and frameworks that will simply not be covered in the ancient texts. And at that point, we have to go beyond. We will not be able to draw on a copy of what has come before. We will need to call on a reservoir of inner courage and wisdom. We will always be blindsided by unforeseen events as much as we prepare. And so, beyond preparation, what we need is inner compass. What we need is anchorage in the depths of tradition, but also being inspired by the lofty vision of what has not yet happened and the blessings that may come in the future. And when we have both the framework and the foundation of the past, but also the blessings that are yet to come, and the vision of the nobility of the world that we would like to create for our own inner selves, for our families, our friends, our communities, those who we serve, the world as a whole, then, like that 14-year-old young man, we can hope and pray that we will be visited with the courage and the wisdom to do the right thing at the moment. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you today? Thank you all for coming. I know everybody's really busy and you have other favorite places you want to go for breakfast today, but you came here, so we're grateful for that. Thank you. My name is Aaron Ain, and I have the privilege to introduce our speaker this morning, our guest speaker, our exciting guest speaker. So let me tell you a little bit about Gail Goodman. Gail is one of the remarkable leaders in the technology industry here in Massachusetts. Through her direct efforts as the CEO for 16 years at Constant Contact, Gail and her team created a special set of products and services that today have a dramatic impact on small businesses throughout the world. Over 650,000 companies around the world are customers of Constant Contact. Gail led a successful IPO while at the company and has been named by so many organizations around the world or around the country, around Massachusetts, as a top executive. Some are in your program. It would take me all morning just to go through all of those. And on top of that, she's been a consummate innovator and an advanced thinker. You see, Gail has done it all, so it's really a privilege for us to be able to listen to her today. I've had the pleasure of working by Gail's side as we served together as trustees of the Massachusetts Technology Leadership Council, or excuse me, the Massachusetts High Technology. No, I got it right the first time. There's so many of them, I get mixed up. Where I saw firsthand how Gail shared her wisdom and provided her leadership to make Massachusetts a top place for startups to large, successful corporations. I was thinking, Rabbi, of what you said this morning, and when I sit on panels with Gail, which I've done, and I've heard her speak in group settings, I think that she does have the skills to look for the inner courage and wisdom, what it takes to be successful in running a company and dealing with those unforeseen circumstances and challenges, which we all do when we lead organizations. So really special. Now, Gail has graciously agreed to share her experiences in leading a world-class technology organization from pre-revenue startup to over $1 billion in public market valuation, culminating in the recent sale of the company this year, both a sad thing and a happy thing, to Endurance International. Gail has served her customers, she's taken care of her employees, and she's rewarded her shareholders. It's really a special treat to have her here this morning to share her values and her vision and her wisdom of what's made her and her company successful. So please join me in giving a big welcome to Gail Goodman.
Here today. Thanks for having me. I was asked to talk specifically about leadership and culture, which was very welcome to me because I'm extremely proud of the culture we created at Constant Contact. And as I was reflecting on what I had to say about that, so I thought, I'm just going to go through what I think were some of the foundations that produced a great culture. And then we'll get into Q&A fairly quickly. And, it's funny, I'm going to talk about these things as if they were like fully formed best practices that I had. Honestly, we figured it out as we went along. So a lot of this is kind of packaging the wisdom of 16 years and a super great collaborative team, some members of which are in the room, who helped us figure it out together. It's funny, at the beginning, it was really just about being very mission-driven. Who's our customer and the problem we're trying to solve for them, and really being passionate about helping small businesses succeed. As things got kind of packaged and phrased and kind of redone, in the end, we ended up with a phrase, which is we define our success by your success. This is us talking to our customer. And that was a great way to kind of bring it together. But if you actually live that, a lot of the rest of the culture just fell out from this being really mission-driven. And then I'd say I'm going to talk about three what I thought were key foundational elements that hopefully also kind of can apply to a nonprofit organization, a business, whatever. The first one I'd say was strategic alignment. You know, it's funny, we always bring to organizations the lessons we learned, good and bad, from the past experiences we had. And I came to Constant Contact from an organization that just had trouble with focus and alignment. So, you know, I was just like determined we weren't going to make those mistakes, right? Just the ones that you just saw, you're not going to make those mistakes. And we began a real rigor around strategic alignment. Now that sounds like fancy words. You know, in the end, it's, you know, here's what we're doing and here's what we're not doing, right? Here's the customers we serve and the problems we solve for them, particularly in the technology world. You know, boy, we could do this. We could go up market. We could serve this customer. We could, you know, I remember one moment where we realized that rather than getting individual small businesses one at a time, we could go at franchise owners and national distributors and get to, you know, tens of thousands all at once. Because trust me, getting them one at a time is actually really hard. Right? We had a lot of trouble getting to early scale. Right? Again, just a little backdrop. We charged at the beginning about $30 a month to our customers. So I remember when we got to 100 customers, woohoo! Like $3,000 a month. 1,000 customers, right? Woohoo! Right? Not enough, like I called it the long, slow, you know, SaaS, software as a service, ramp of death. Right? Because it just took a really long time to get to scale, so we're always trying to figure out how are we going to get there faster, how are we going to, you know, get there faster. But as we started thinking about going after these national organizations, it just became clear that was a really different business model. And strategic alignment brought us back to what we cared about, what we wanted to do. And it turns out it's really hard to get strategic alignment. You take a group of humans and you put them in a room, and they all come with their own sets of experiences. Even the words you're using can mean very different things to the individuals around the table. And when you're small, it's hard. When you get big, it gets harder. And so we developed a real rigor around it. And yet some of it was just taking the time to do it, right? In the throes of daily operating, right, months and quarters and running the business and hiring people and taking care of this, taking care of that, if you do not take the time to have strategic alignment conversations, and they take time. This is not a 5-minute side conversation at your weekly operating meeting. You've got to take the time. So we started with once a year offsites, then we ended up with twice a year, 2-day offsites, and 1-day sessions in between. That's a lot of time. But honestly, I think it was time that saved us time later, right? It was time that got us on the same page and then let us run considerably faster. But what was amazing is while we would have hard debates at those offsites and we'd leave with alignment, it wouldn't be 3 days before something would come up that tested the boundaries of our newly aligned decision-making. That's life, right? That's the circumstances that come and drive that. And so it's constant work to keep aligned, but if you do that, you kind of keep your core, right? You keep that mission, vision, strategy part really, really solid. And then another key piece of that is, wow, that's great if you do it with, 6 or 8 people at the top. But you got to get that alignment understanding into the guts of everybody in the organization. And guess what? That's work too. Because it's not enough to tell from the top. People have to try things on. People have to use them in context. I'm gonna mangle this, but right, like I think we remember 50% of what we hear, and like, I'm gonna totally mangle this, but in the end, we remember 85% of what we use, right? So, me standing up and saying, here's the strategy, here's what we do, here's what we don't do, and like say it once and go, that's not gonna get the job done. You have to get people to use it and apply it. And so We had leadership team meetings, and we drove that down, and literally in new hire training, people got the strategy. Here are the core metrics of the business. Here's why taking care of the customer matters, not just to our mission and our vision, but to our economics. And here's how your job connects to the customer lifetime value. Everybody at Constant Contact could tell you which metrics they were driving. That's alignment. And it was a powerful part of our culture. Kind of connected to that, the second foundation is knowing and living our values. These are all intertwined. I've put them in 3 buckets to help kind of frame a conversation. And at the beginning, we didn't really write down our values. Funny story was, one of our early values was no corporate BS. I won't swear here, I'll just use an abbreviation. And so for a really long time, we didn't write down our values because writing down your values would be a violation of our values. We got ourselves in this little catch-22. And I was actually up for an award. I was up for an Ernst & Young Entrepreneur of the Year award, and they interview you, and the guy says, so what are your core values? And I'm like, well, we haven't written down our core values because one of our key values is no corporate BS. He looked me in the eye and he said, I hear you, Gail, but they're only BS if you don't live them. Excellent point. And so we came back and went through a process of writing down our core values, and we actually ended up with some really nice core values. They were a little wordy, nobody remembered them, and then finally we boiled them down to 3 very simple core values that everyone could remember. Customer first, always. Get it done, and seriously awesome people. It turns out in the core of that was our customer mission, vision, value. Our rabid focus on, just getting things done, more, kind of be accountable, be responsible, get it done, right? Take action. And then seriously awesome people was really that combination of hiring people who believed in our mission, but we also always had a very strong focus on teaming. Everything was cross-functional. In our business, I used to say, one side of the business would sneeze, engineering would sneeze, and customer care would have to pick up the tissue, right? Nobody could do anything without each other. I will actually quote Dan, who used to say we were chained together at the ankles. A little less utopian vision of that teamwork, but we were in it together, and so we had to be great at cross-functional collaboration. And knowing and living your values really means you have to hire on values, which means you have to be really good. People are so good at interviewing these days. So you got to develop the behavioral interviewing skills that really get beneath their sound, their polished sound bites to figure out whether, what their real values are. Right? It means promoting on values, and it means firing on values. And so we had many, many opportunities where we had individual contributors who were really strong in their function, but were causing team disruption. And we swallowed hard and did what we said we were going to. We lived our values. We let them go. And I will say, every time we did that, the water rose for the rest of the team. People saw it. People knew we were going to be true to what we were saying. And by the way, that then encouraged them to get their friends to work there. So we consistently had roughly 40% of our new hires as internal referrals. That is just a triple win, right? They're good because someone's not going to refer in someone who isn't. They're going to fit in because they already have some norming, and by the way, that's the least expensive way to hire. So Constant Contact was a great place to work. Now we're mission-driven. We're a great place to work because of great people and a great set of values. And then I'll say the final foundation that I think leads to kind of great culture, I didn't have a fancy word for it. I just called it adaptive leadership, which is really recognizing that the way you lead an organization has to change all the time. It changes as the company scales. It changes based on the situation. It changes based on the individuals you're speaking to, right? You don't talk to your executive team the same way you talk to a bunch of college new hires, right? Leadership is got to be highly, highly adaptive. And a key piece of our leadership philosophy was the giving and receiving of feedback. Feedback's a gift, and it's one of those gifts you'd much rather give than receive, right? Right? But, you know, we just are often not aware of how our very innocent habits or style things might be impacting others around us. And the only way we'll know is if we create a safe environment so people can tell us. And it's really hard to listen to feedback that is indicating that your style is not making it, you know, a great workplace for others. But we just went through a process of getting everyone okay with that. And there's all sorts of tricks to that, right? You got to be in the right place with the right, you know, like, but in the end, if you make that happen, if the answer is we're going to be great, we're going to be a great team, the only way we can be a great team is if we're open to understanding how our behaviors impact the team. Not just the business, but the team itself and its willingness to collaborate and work together. It opens up the door to really have difficult conversations, to confront the truth of a situation. Again, in business and in people just want to spin and sugarcoat, and the truth is the world is constantly changing. The market's changing, the customer's changing, competition is changing, right? The economy is changing, the world environment is changing. And if a team can honestly look at what's going on and really discuss it without kind of needing to either sugarcoat the situation or make it seem like their team is doing great, it's everybody else, all the things that happen in organizations, something special can happen. Something really special can happen. But that, again, takes work. This willingness to give and receive feedback, to understand your impact on the rest of the team. And in the middle of that, that's really about people development and mentoring and being, we always had a bias to promoting from within and growing from within. Didn't always work. Sometimes as we grew, we needed skills from outside. But we had a disproportionate investment in leadership development. People always say, wow, you have a lot of leadership development for a company your size. A lot was 2 people, by the way. But we felt like that was really important, again, to the core of our culture. I wish the giving and receiving of feedback was a skill we learned in kindergarten, right? But most people came in very resistant to that, right? We'd been taught to have this brave face to the world and shoulders back, right? That you need to be vulnerable to take in feedback. I gotta tell you, that was quite a little lesson for me, right? That wasn't natural for me. And it helped when I told people that, right? You're gonna get a lot of feedback at Constant Contact. Not always gonna feel good. Doesn't always feel good to me. But the only way you do that is develop new skills and new norms and kind of break down pathways, and it takes time and effort to do that. So essentially, we put together these 3 foundations. I'm making it sound like they were, really well organized. They only got well organized as I was writing my notes for this talk. But it was, this strategic alignment on mission and values, and relentlessly coming back and staying aligned. The strong core values that we lived in our hearts, right, and every day. And I did, by the way, have a fantastic human resources person who helped me keep us, it always helps when you have a partner, but helped us stay on our core values. And then just being really mindful of you and your team's leadership role and how that needs to change and adapt, and really how to be students of leadership continuously. Learning, continuous learning, not just about your market and your customers and your business, but about yourselves and your leadership. Continuous learning was a part of the constant contact culture that helped us continue to be better and better. And when we put those three things together, I think we had a strong, culture-driven organization that endured through, a wide set of market changes and growth curve changes. And I'm really proud of what we did. And I'll leave that as a foundation, and I think we're going to do some Q&A. So hope that was helpful.
Good morning. My name is Rabbi Daniel Lehman. I'm the president here at Hebrew College. I want to welcome you all to the CEO Forum and thank Gail very much for sharing those insights. We're going to go around, I think, and collect questions. There are pieces of paper to write them down, and I will moderate. Before coming to Hebrew College, I was a high school principal, so I know how to deal with questions that may be not the most appropriate. We'll weed those out. But I want to start actually with a question which comes from this week's Torah portion. It's Parshat Kedoshim, and the famous phrase in this parsha is Kedoshim Tihiyu, you shall be holy. And I think, interestingly, it's physically toward the center of the entire Torah. And I think for many people, this week's Torah portion contains within it the core values, the kind of strategic mission of the Jewish people. So it's worth reading, again. And I wanted to take two core values from it and ask you how they relate. And one connected to what you said toward the end of your talk. There is a commandment in this week's Torah portion which involves the requirement to give criticism to your fellow, to your countryman, your neighbor, your teammate. Hocheach tochiach et amitecha. You shall surely reprove, give feedback, but critical feedback, to your fellow country person, your fellow citizen. And the rabbinic literature is replete with discussions about how difficult that is to do it well. It is one of the most difficult commandments to pull off. And I was wondering, you mentioned the feedback culture that you created and how challenging that was in terms of looking at one's own leadership and how one impacts the team. And I'm curious if you could give us a little bit more detail, maybe an example of what you were modeling throughout the organization in terms of how to give constructive criticism in a way that actually advanced the leadership of the organization.
So maybe I'll just talk a little bit about I'll do some like tactical process stuff in a minute, but I'll start with, I think the biggest thing I learned is people have to know you care about them first, and that the reason you're giving the feedback is to make them and the company better off. That this is not like, let me just go with the first one. People need to know you care about them. And that actually means you have to care about them. Right? This is not a learn the 3 phrases that, say it up front. You actually have to care about them, which means you have to care about how they're going to receive the feedback and whether that feedback might feel hurtful. And this is actually, we don't do that a lot in business, to be honest, right? We're very transactional. So one of the key things I think is you really do have to be vulnerable as a giver of feedback, not just a receiver of feedback, which sounds maybe a little counterintuitive. But you have to open to the experience of the person across the table as you're delivering the feedback. So you got to care. And you do have to give that feedback from a place of integrity. This isn't a, petty, you need this. This is I honestly want you to be better so we can be better, so everything can be more comfortable. So I'd say those are kind of a few things. We also did, though, create a few ways for people to give feedback that just made it easier. So 360-degree, performance reviews where it was anonymous, right? It was structured, so it was constructive, but, it's pretty hard, for an individual contributor new to business to give feedback to their manager face-to-face. That's probably, expecting that to happen is probably not a good expectation. So we created structures like that. We had company-wide feedback in terms of, we did a big employee engagement survey once a year and then pulses every quarter. That wasn't the big one, with open commentary. And of course, the open commentary is the good stuff. The numbers are nice, but the open commentary is where the meat comes from. And people knew, and we read every comment. I mean, people knew that I read every comment. Because I made sure they knew I read every comment. So they knew that if there was something they wanted me to know, that was a place where they could put it. And people wrote some pretty direct things there. So we had a lot of processes that made it easy for people kind of who maybe were 4 levels down to give feedback to the CEO. As an executive team, we did a bunch of exercises that really helped. We would do speed feedback. So, you literally, it would start with someone saying, I want feedback on this. Didn't mean you were only limited to giving feedback on that. You could give feedback on other things, but, generally we kind of had done a 360 feedback first. So it was like, I'm getting feedback that I'm, too quick to blah, 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 whatever. Could you give me some feedback on that? But then you could also go elsewhere. People would prep in advance. So I'm going to tell Dan this, I'm going to tell Mitchell that, right? Sometimes it was start, stop, keep, right? Start doing this, stop doing that, keep doing this. So it had some structure to it. We'd sit together, 5 minutes this way, 5 minutes that way, switch seats. Go to the next exec, 5 minutes this way, 5 minutes that way. Take notes, listen. Listening skills, we always talked about listening skills. So that's a nice technique to just break down the barriers. And then at the end, you take 10 minutes and summarize the notes, and you have to tell the team what you heard, right? So if you heard some stuff that was hard, you got to own it right there. So those are techniques that just sort of break down barriers because we're all going through it together. It's all two-way. And then we all need to say what we heard. So that's a nice little technique for a small team, is that kind of, I'll call it speed dating feedback.
Great. One more from this week's Torah portion. I'm curious about the corporate culture around charitable giving. And in this week's Torah portion, we have, as a part of the core mission of the Jewish people, I think, the command to leave part of your agricultural field, either the corner of the field or the things that fall as you're harvesting for the poor, which is interesting because that's probably in an agrarian society what corporate giving was about. It was taking your livelihood, your business, your income, and trying to distribute it from what otherwise would be your own profit. So I'm just wondering what you did or how you thought about, as a corporation, your responsibility to the broader society.
Yep. So we started pretty early with something we called Cares for Community, for those who might have been around. And we started from our field. So our field was helping small businesses and nonprofits do marketing. So the best thing we could give away was our marketing expertise and the software that went behind that. So we actually started with every employee could sponsor a nonprofit and give them a free Constant Contact account. But we expected them, when they did that, to also help that nonprofit use that account. So the expertise plus the software. And every employee could do that. And then we had like, oh, why don't we let our customers do that too? Now, 30% of our customer base was nonprofits. So that made us a little nervous. Like suddenly every nonprofit is like going to get it for free and we're going to lose 30% of our revenue. Oh my God, how's that going to work? Blah, blah, blah. But in the end, we decided to focus that on what was one of our core beliefs, which was the power of education. So it had to be an education nonprofit, and preferably an education around entrepreneurship. That would be a double bonus. But we sort of said, in your communities, we want you to support education. It's pretty broad. And so every customer could give away a constant contact account to a nonprofit focused on youth education. And it wasn't actually youth, it was just education in general. And again, we said to our customers, although it didn't enforce it, we'd like you to not just give them the account, we'd like you to give them your expertise in using the account to make them better marketers. And then as we got bigger, we actually had a corporate social responsibility person, and we started kind of doing stuff in the community, like helping the Waltham schools here, we had a place in Colorado, which unfortunately just had a ridiculous number of disasters. Fires, floods, mass shootings. It felt like in Colorado, there was always a disaster we could rally to support. But that became a key piece of our culture, was kind of helping the local community.
I mean, it's interesting to note that actually giving a constant contact account to a not-for-profit is very much like leaving the corner of your field, and it's actually doing what you do, but helping other people with that product. So I'm going to ask you some questions. I'm not going to be able to get to all of them. I apologize in advance. Here's a question. Does the culture you created at Constant Contact encourage risk-taking? And if so, how did you do that?
Yeah. Boy, I'd sure like to say yes. We certainly had an innovation center. We had a real philosophy of testing. Well, one of the wonderful things about an online business is you can create a test, right? So, I think customers will respond better to A, I think they'll respond better to B. Let's just put it up as a split test, and 50% of the customers see one, 50% see the other, and we can see what happens. So we were rabid testers. I'd say actually at one point we got a little too, everything had to have a test, and it slowed us down, which is interesting. The very thing that was designed to encourage risk-taking started to slow us down, which is kind of another interesting thing. But in the end, we decided to invest in innovation process. So we had a very small team that actually was bringing best practices and tools into the company. So everything from lean canvas, do people know what I mean when I say that? So in the tech world, there have been a bunch of, I'll just call them practices, designed to really focus your experimentation. What's the key hypothesis? What would prove or disprove this hypothesis? You put it on one page. It's called a lean canvas. And it's just a way to really articulate, what it is you're trying to test. And so we did kind of combine, the processes with the culture. And I don't know if we were ever always perfect on that. It's also just a limit to how much you can do at once, and we tried to be pretty rigorous to that as well.
So you talked about living your core values. Do you think your corporate board lived those values?
I do. I really do. So, the board, again, changed as we grew. After we got public, we started to kind of... Any venture capitalists in the room? We started to move the VCs off. It became actually easier to have our core values aligned once that. No tweeting that. But the board was the customer success, the core value of customer success, customers first always, was always shared by the board. always shared by the board and always talked about at the board level. We always felt, particularly as we went public, that customer success was going to drive growth and profitability. So there was no disconnect between the alignment of that value and the alignment of serving the shareholders. Sometimes the time horizons became a little bit more of a debate, short-term value versus long-term value, but we never felt like there was a conflict between our core values and serving public shareholders.
And did you drive your core values by paying your employees through a corporate bonus plan? I mean, was that a vehicle for focusing people on the core values?
Well, we were very big on shared goals, so everybody had stock options till the very end, literally. Every employee was an owner. Every employee could participate in an employee stock purchase plan, which is a little unusual in this day and age, but they give a portion of their income into a little pool, and at the end, they get it at a 15% discount to the lower of the beginning or ending stock price of that period. They were 6-month periods. But more importantly, I think as we set annual and quarterly goals, we pushed them down and made them shared across the organization so that it drove another level of alignment. And again, wove customer success metrics into those shared goals. So I think we did a really good job of that kind of alignment through both kind of goal setting and rewards. Was there a moment where you felt you had arrived at the tipping point where you say, okay, this is now, now we're a real company now? And what was that, and how did you determine that you had arrived at that point? I don't think I ever felt that. So, I just always felt like we were on the, hairy edge of something going wrong and disaster happening. I'm pretty paranoid. So I never felt like I made it, and I never felt like it was safe, and I don't know. So I don't know that the IPO moment was obviously a moment, right? That was a pretty cool moment. But even then, I was like, what's going to happen to the stock price? What do I need to do to keep it up? It's a whole new market, whole new set of constituents I need to learn how to talk to. And so, no, I actually never felt like I made it.
And how did you and the board arrive at the decision to sell the company at this particular point?
Yeah. So that is a unbelievably complex decision. I think we really saw a few things coming together. Remember I talked about how hard it was to reach small businesses one at a time. We had stalled at 50,000 new customers a quarter. Sounds like an outrageously high number, but at some point the law of large numbers catches up with you, and if that isn't growing, your overall business isn't growing. So we were struggling to find new channels to the small business market, but actually had found some partners who were being very successful helping us. And it looked like if we could get closer to them, and this was in particular the hosting companies, and we were working with a couple of them, and one of them, Endurance, was having good success, but basically said to us, as a partner, we're doing this much work. If you were part of us, we would do this much work. We think we should combine. So it all started with someone showing up at our door who solved our biggest strategic challenge of the moment. Okay, that's a pretty good way to start a conversation. And then a second one showed up. So the board was kind of like, we love our mission, we love our independence, but this is intriguing because it solves our biggest growth problem. And then we had a second bidder, which is always, if you're trying to sell something, competition is a good thing. That really got us thinking, all right, maybe now is the time. That combined with a changing competitive landscape. The competitive landscape was getting increasingly crowded. It had always been crowded, but it was getting worse. And it was coming from some new directions. And so we were looking out kind of multiple years and saying, wow, these competitive threats are new and hard. It helped that the stock was near an all-time high, so we could really get our shareholders a great return. And we started doing, this is the brutally honest conversations, right? If we can get this price now, what do we think the price will be 2 years from now? And here are some scenarios that could play out. And most of them look like the stock wouldn't be as high. And in the end, we work for the shareholders. And I have to say, at some level, this was sort of heartbreaking for me personally, because I knew the culture would change. Not necessarily good or bad, just different. And I knew our independent mission would change. It would have to become a shared mission with our new owners. And so a lot of what we had built as a team and felt great about was just going to change. And we had to be open to that. And I think we had the same kind of honest conversation I talked about having as an executive team in the boardroom, and came to what I think was very much the right decision. Timing is everything.
Have government policies impacted either the core values or the implementation or your business strategies at all?
No, they've just cost us a ridiculous amount of administrative money, but they never changed our core values or our strategy.
Is there a book that you could recommend for people to read that would focus either on the teamwork or the giving back of giving and taking criticism that you felt was helpful to you?
So I'll name a couple. There's one particularly difficult book called Leadership and Self-Deception. Anybody read it? Yeah, got a couple of hands. Yeah. It's a little dense. You really gotta. It's work. So I like Patrick Lencioni. Let me start with the easy one, The Advantage. So there's a book called a guy named Patrick Lencioni wrote The 5 Dysfunctions of a Team, and
We read it here.
Okay.
Our administrative team.
and he just recently he'd done like 5 books, and he just did a book that summarized it all called The Advantage. So I'd start with that. It's a much easier read than Leadership and Self-Deception. But if you want to really look inside yourself on kind of this, being a team member bigger than yourself and recognizing when you are attacking an issue from self-interest, this Leadership and Self-Deception is a more introspective and dense book, and I would recommend that one as well.
So I want to take this opportunity again to thank Gail for sharing these insights with us. We wanted to make sure to finish by 9 o'clock to get everybody off on their day, and I want to stick with that commitment. I also want to take this opportunity to thank the co-chairs for this event, Karl Chudnovsky, who is really the founder of the CEO Forum concept and has been behind the scenes helping us develop it, and David Teplow and Greg Stoller, who worked so hard to put this together. Got it? Okay. I also want to thank our institutional advancement team, Rabbi Lisa Keshet, who's our vice president for institutional advancement, Jan Schwartz, who worked with her and helped really put all of the details and logistics of this morning's breakfast together. And I want to thank our board members who are here. Harold Kotler, the chairman of our board, is with us this morning, and other board members who have come to support Hebrew College not only today, but every day and throughout the year. And as David said in his wonderful introduction, we really want to invite all of you to participate, not just in the CEO forums, but other forms of adult education that we have constantly throughout the year. We want to stay in constant contact with you. And we want to welcome you to our public events, our classes. We want to make Hebrew College your intellectual and spiritual home. And we hope that you'll take advantage of the various opportunities that we have throughout the year for learning and for enrichment and for that soul workout that David mentioned at the beginning. We have a wonderful commencement coming up on June 5th here Sunday morning with great honorary degree recipients and wonderful, wonderful graduates from our various programs, Rabbinical School, Cantorial School, Schools of Education, and Jewish Studies. As you probably know, we have hundreds of teenagers here every Sunday studying various Jewish topics with us, and we do adult education with CJP, our partner, throughout the community with young adults and with people all the way up into their senior years. So please take advantage of it. We're here for you, and we're here to serve the community, and we appreciate all of your support and your participation. So have a wonderful day and a wonderful spring and summer. So thank you for coming.